I got me the cheapest flour I could find, and what could go wrong? Kartoffel 1, Kartoffel 2. Gluten-Tag. Normally when baking bread I always like to resort to good, quite expensive flour. But what if we were to use the cheapest flour available? Could we still make a decent bread out of this? Maybe the German in me was always overpaying for flour. Let's give this a shot. I'm gonna try making a sourdough bread out of this. Let's see if this is actually going to work. This is cake flour and it's not so strong. Eiweiß gluten, it only has a very little amount of gluten. I seriously have no idea if we can make a sourdough bread out of this. This flour was around $50. For the recipe I'm using 400 grams of flour. I'm using my liquid starter. It adds very nice flavor. 40 grams of sourdough starter, 8 grams of salt. And since this flour is very weak, I don't want to be using too much water. I'm using a very low amount of water. This flour can handle it. 260 grams of water. And now I'm kneading this in my stand mixer until I see that the dough lets go of the container. I should probably plug the power cable in. On a more serious note, please, before asking an IT guy for help, make sure that your monitor cable is actually plugged in. The dough has been kneaded and it's looking good so far. I will be extracting a small piece of the dough, and once this doubled in size roughly, this dough is ready. At least that's what I normally do for my flour. This is so much better than relying on a recipe that tells you wait for 5 hours, wait for 8 hours, because this is always different with sourdough. This totally depends on your environment, the temperature, and so on. I'm rounding this up. Then I'm placing it in a new container. Very good looking dough. Sample extracted, and once this doubled, this dough is ready. At a 50% size increase, I will be giving this one additional stretch and fold.
Approximately 10 hours later.
It has been around 10 hours and this sample here has barely moved. However, the dough here itself has actually inflated quite a bit. So let me now try to shape it. Oh my goodness, do you see this? This dough has become so sticky now. The dough is tearing. I can show you here. You see that? This dough is going to turn into a flat pancake. No, this is completely over fermented. But we will bake this anyways, and then I'll show you the disaster so that you can laugh at me. Lots and lots of flour. Fail. It already starts to stick to the Benetton. Oh, it's gonna be a mess. Anyways, I'm putting this into the fridge to proof overnight, and then we will try to bake this tomorrow. Let's try to bake this. I think it's gonna be a fail. I'm baking this on parchment paper because I don't want this to completely stick to my stone. The stone has been preheated. Oh, not too bad. It came out quite nicely. Let me give this a score now. And then into the oven. I didn't preheat a tray here on top, that just went in. I'm gonna be placing a little bit of boiling water. Here's my stone. And this simulates a Dutch oven. This is a really great way to bake bread at home. No convection, no fan, just upper bottom heat. And then 230 degrees Celsius. Ta-da! Bread number 1, looking quite cute. We even do have a little bit of oven spring here, but overall it's looking very, very flat. Let's taste this. It looks fluffy, it looks nice. This is a decent bread, I would say. Let's give this a taste now. Great. but also quite sour, I gotta say. Now this might be very German, around 6 centimeters in height. This dough has been so sticky, I really needed to take a break. And this is how Germans like to take breaks.
Wow, look at all these potatoes. I totally need to count them.
Kartoffel 1, Kartoffel 2, Kartoffel 3. Oh my goodness, 62 potatoes. So next up, we're gonna be baking another bread with the same flour, but this time we are changing our sourdough starter. And don't be fooled, by changing our sourdough starter, I am hoping that everything is going to look quite different. Rather than using a normal or liquid starter, which always has equal parts of flour and water, we are switching to what is called a so-called stiff starter. The stiff starter has half the water of the flour, so it's much more stiff. And just by doing so, we no longer have so much bacterial activity, which tears down the gluten inside of your dough. We have more yeast activity, and yeast creates very, very fluffy bread. So we will not be losing as much gluten, and we will not be running into the stickiness issue that we had in the end. So let's try this. Surprising results incoming. Ta-da! The final bread. It didn't open as much here as I wanted it to, but check out those crispy blisters here. I can't wait to slice this open. Wow. Look at this incredible fluffiness. So the previous one was 6 centimeters and this one is at 10 centimeters. Same amount of flour. Let's taste this. And this is so
So good and tasty.
This is the stuff. I was surprised to see. Both breads actually turned out quite well. From a taste perspective, I like the one with a liquid starter a little bit more. It had this nice tang to it. From a texture perspective, I definitely like the one made with a stiff starter more. So when you don't have expensive flour at hand, please try making a bread with a stiff starter. It's gonna be a total game changer for you. Now to the question whether I would always be buying cheap flour from now on. Nope, I would not. Because you need to know that wheat is typically treated a lot before it's being harvested. When there's too much water, your wheat starts to sprout. And this way, all your gluten is destroyed. This way, for baking bread, the wheat flour loses some of its good properties. You won't have such a fluffy dough anymore. And to do that, for instance, several chemicals are used on your flour. If you have an organic flour, then the farmers have to be much more careful about such procedures. So it tasted great, but long term for your health, it might not be so good. Furthermore, the flour always behaves exactly the same, which is quite unnatural. The soil in your field is not everywhere the same. You might have different amounts of sun. So of course your flour also changes. Especially now if you add flour from additional farmers and you blend that together, how it's done in the large mills. Now next year suddenly your flour is slightly different, and large bakeries don't want that. They would need to adjust their process. That's why flour is typically blended. Certain amino acids are added, certain are removed. So it's quite far away from the flour that you originally have. Regardless, I think this has been a really eye-opening experiment. I would be super curious to know whether you will try baking with a stiff starter. Please drop a comment in the comment section. One of you gets the chance to win a cool shirt like this one. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the gluten be with you.